I'm not even attracted to George anymore. He's like a brother I pay the bills with. That line. That one line. If she'd stabbed me in the chest with the steak knife sitting 5 inches from her hand, it would have hurt less. I was standing by the coat rack in the hallway, 10 feet from the dining room. I had just hung up Denise's faux fur jacket and reached for Carl's rain-damp windbreaker when I heard Chloe's voice, slurred just enough to be dangerous. There was a pause in the chatter before it, the kind of lull where the universe holds its breath just long enough to let truth slip out like a blade. The laughter that followed was the kind that doesn't bounce off walls. It seeps into drywall and lingers for years. Denise's giggle, Carl's snort. Even that new girl, Jenna, who Chloe had sworn she barely liked, chimed in with a wine-wet chuckle like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. I could practically hear Chloe grinning, swirling her overpriced Pinot like she'd just dropped the punchline of a stand-up special. Who cares? He's in the other room. Yeah, I was. And maybe it was the way she said it. Casual, dismissive, like I wasn't a person anymore. Just a line item on her utility bill. Or maybe it was the timing. Her best friend's birthday, hosted in our house, using my handmade walnut dining table that took me 3 months to build. The one she always said gave us character, like something out of an Architectural Digest spread. I had stained that thing in the garage while she was texting God knows who on the patio with a glass of rose and a playlist called Sunday Vibes blasting through our backyard speakers. But that night, under the dim glow of the Edison bulbs she insisted we install, Chloe decided to perform. I walked back into that room like nothing had happened. I even smiled, the kind of smile I hadn't worn since my father's funeral. The tight, rubber one that pulls at your cheeks but never touches your eyes. I handed Carl his jacket and clapped his shoulder. Better get moving before the storm hits. He nodded, eyes just a little too wide, like he suspected I'd heard something. He was always the smart one. Chloe didn't even look at me. She was pouring another drink, her laugh trailing off into a hiccup as she leaned into Jenna and whispered something I didn't catch, but saw reflected in Jenna's raised brow and awkward grin. No apology, no guilt, no awareness, just wine, fake lashes, and the vague scent of betrayal wrapped in perfume I bought her for our anniversary last year. I waited until everyone left, played the host, topped off wine glasses, handed out umbrellas. Chloe kissed cheeks and laughed like nothing in the world could touch her. She even winked at me once. Winked, like I was her partner in crime. Like I hadn't just watched her slowly gut me with a single drunken sentence. When the door closed behind Denise, the last to leave, Chloe turned, barefoot, drunk, and radiant in that way only people with no consequences ever are. "We should do this more often," she said, stretching like a cat as she plopped down on the couch. God, I'm exhausted. I looked at her for a long moment. She didn't even notice. That's when I knew. Not that she didn't love me. I'd known that for years. But that she didn't see me anymore. I wasn't George, the man who built her bookshelves, fixed her laptop, rewired the garage so she could have a yoga studio. I was the background, the utility, the soundproof foam padding under her social life. A safe placeholder she could perform her sparkle over. And I'd let it happen. I walked upstairs. She didn't follow. Sat in my study. She didn't knock. Pulled out the drawer where I kept the external drive, the one with copies of contracts, old passwords, account backups, contingency folders I labeled with stupid names like Rainy Day _V2. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even heartbreak. It was clarity. Cold, sober, absolute. At 2:03 a.m., I opened a private browser tab and booked a room at a motel on the other side of the city. One with no cameras, no key cards, just keys. Before I left, I walked back to our bedroom. She was asleep, snoring gently, one arm thrown over the pillow where I used to sleep before she made me start using the guest bed for my back. I looked at her for a while, tried to find the girl I once loved, the woman who used to draw blueprints with me on napkins at diners. She was somewhere in there, but buried under filters, wine, and curated sarcasm. I didn't kiss her goodbye, didn't leave a note. I just took my car and drove. I didn't take my toothbrush, didn't grab a change of socks, didn't even bring my phone charger. That should tell you everything. At 2:17 a.m., I sat in the same creaky desk chair Chloe used to mock, "Your grandpa called." He wants his furniture back. And watch the progress bar crawl across the screen as I transferred every file that mattered from my encrypted flash drive to a cloud server she didn't know existed. Years of careful compartmentalization. Every deed, every tax filing, every password she'd forgotten and asked me to just handle, all going somewhere she could never reach. I was methodical, detached, like I was packing up a job site, not a life. I removed her access to my password manager, revoked her devices from the shared media accounts, and deleted the emergency contacts from the car insurance portal. She never noticed I'd added two-factor authentication months ago. The house was quiet. No wind. No creaks. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional snore echoing from upstairs, punctuated by a drunken sigh that sounded almost smug. There was one moment, brief, ridiculous, where I stood by the front door and thought, maybe I should write her a note. But what would I say? Dear Chloe, I heard you tell our friends I'm a glorified roommate, and while I appreciate the performance, I've decided to exit stage left. No, she didn't deserve a monologue. I left the key on the hallway table next to the hydrangea-scented candle she claimed tied the room together. It didn't. It smelled like funeral homes and denial. I didn't bother turning off the lights. The driveway gravel crunched under my tires as I reversed out. Headlights off. I didn't want to wake the neighbors, or her. Let her sleep, I thought. She'll need it. The motel was 28 miles east. A two-star place with peeling paint, a flickering sign that read Lantern Inn because the second I had burned out, and a night clerk who looked like he hadn't slept since Reagan was president. Perfect. I didn't use my name. Paid cash. Room 11. The smell hit me first, old varnish, wet concrete, and something like lemon cleaner waging war against mildew. But I didn't care. The mattress was firm. The air was cold. The rain ticked on the window like a lullaby for men who just gave up pretending. I lay there in a shirt I'd worn since morning, jeans still on, arms behind my head. The ceiling had a crack that ran in a perfect diagonal from one corner to the light fixture. I stared at it for a while, tracing it with my eyes like it might spell something if I looked long enough. And then, for the first time in years, I slept. No insomnia. No midnight anxiety spirals about her credit card bills or what weird thing she'd post on Instagram the next morning to get a rise out of someone she used to date. No wondering if I was boring or just old. I slept like the man I used to be, back before I traded silence for survival. Back before I let someone reduce me to background noise in my own damn house. Chloe was probably still snoring. Still curled up in the expensive sheets I bought on a trip she didn't want to take. Dreaming, maybe, about how she'd entertain next. Or who. She'd wake up around 10, maybe later. She always did after a bender. At first, she'd think I went for coffee. Then maybe a walk. Then, maybe, if I was lucky, a flicker of something deeper. But by then, her world would already be slipping. Because I wasn't just gone. I had already started the avalanche. Chloe woke up to sunlight bleeding through the blackout curtains, mouth dry, head pounding like a war drum. Her mascara had half melted onto the pillowcase, and the taste of Pinot and smugness still lingered on her tongue. George wasn't next to her. That wasn't unusual. He was always up early, even on Sundays, walking the neighborhood trail or sketching god-awful cabin designs in his study. She always teased him about it, said he had the sleep habits of a monk and the fashion sense of one, too. So, she stretched, groaned, and reached for her phone to text him to grab croissants from that overpriced bakery he pretended to hate. No notification. No text. No shared calendar pings. Strange. She tried refreshing the app. Nothing. That's weird, she mumbled, sitting up, rubbing her temple like it might jog something into place. She padded downstairs barefoot, calling out with mock cheer, "Georgie, you alive?" Silence. The living room still smelled faintly of red wine and whatever perfume Jenna had doused herself in last night. The wine glasses were gone, cleaned and drying neatly on the rack. Typical George. Couldn't sleep without putting everything back in order. She checked the driveway through the window. His car was gone. Okay, maybe he ran out early. But then she noticed something. Subtle, but jarring in the way only a missing rhythm feels off in a familiar song. The charger was gone. Not just the one by the nightstand. The backup one from the kitchen drawer vanished. And when she opened her laptop to check the week's schedule on their shared calendar, it prompted her for a login, then told her the calendar had been discontinued. Discontinued? The hell does that mean? She blinked hard, like maybe the wine still hadn't cleared from her bloodstream. Texted him. No reply. Sent another one, more annoyed this time. Still nothing. Her heart started to tap faster now. Not full panic yet, but a creeping unease. She called his phone. It went straight to voicemail. She dialed again, this time his brother Mark, the family's unofficial fixer who always showed up with bourbon and bad jokes during their rough patches. Hey Mark, have you heard from George? I think he forgot to plug his phone in or something. There was a pause. Too long. Chloe, I haven't talked to George in over a week. What? That can't be right. He was here last night. Another pause. Then Mark's voice shifted. Firmer, cautious. He told me he was taking some space. That was 5 days ago. Figured he was staying with you again. That's when her stomach flipped. Not the slow roll of a hangover, but the icy punch of something cracking underneath your feet. She hung up without saying goodbye, walked into the study, and opened the drawer where George kept his backup phone. The one he said was just in case. Gone. She opened the closet. His hiking boots? Gone. Rain jacket? Gone. That ugly maroon pullover she always told him to throw out? Gone. She finally sat down at the dining table, the same one she'd joked over just hours ago, where she'd treated her husband like a punchline and her life like a talk show. She sat exactly where Denise had been, laughing at her joke, and looked around like she was seeing the room for the first time. It was too clean, too staged, like a showroom version of her life. All the props were still there, but the man who built the stage had left. Her fingers trembled as she opened her email. She typed in George's address. Hit send. Hey, where are you? Can we talk? The email bounced. Account deleted. And that's when panic wasn't a whisper anymore. It screamed. At exactly 11:07 a.m., her laptop pinged. Not a text. Not an email. A Slack notification. You've been removed from this workspace. Chloe stared at it like it was written in Sanskrit. She blinked twice, refreshed the page, clicked around like maybe she'd accidentally logged into the wrong account. But no, her name, her photo, her bio gone. Replaced by a bland placeholder profile. Some kind of glitch, she muttered, nerves twitching. Right? Just a glitch. But then she opened the admin dashboard of the client portal George had set up for her freelance branding firm. A sleek little boutique operation he built in their garage before she ever had a client to fill it. Back then, it was all coffee meetings and Canva templates. Now it was 5 figures a month, 3 assistants, and 2 retainer contracts she bragged about at dinner parties. Except now, she couldn't log in. Access denied. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands and called her assistant, Natalie, the bright-eyed marketing grad she used to make fetch her lattes and clean up her Canva brainstorms. Natalie? Hey, I'm locked out of everything. What's going on? Did you do a system update without telling me? There was a pause. Not nervous. Just rehearsed. Oh, George said you'd be unavailable this week. He gave me admin rights last night. What? Unavailable? I didn't approve that. I know, but he said it was a legal thing. That I should just make sure client communication keeps running smoothly. The contracts are all under his name, so. Chloe cut her off. His name? Why the hell would anything be under his? But she stopped herself. Because of course it was. George had been the one who set up the LLC. She'd laughed about it at the time, called it George's vanity project, and told her friends he was playing CEO. But now her calendar, her payment processors, her entire damn career was funneled through an infrastructure built by a man she reduced to background noise. And she had no keys to the kingdom. She hung up on Natalie without saying another word. Opened her email. Nothing from clients. She checked the company Instagram account. The bio had changed. Creative Branding Solutions. Contact Natalie at claretide.co. Claretide. That was George's old design concept. A fake name he once brainstormed for an art collective he never had time to start. She'd called it pretentious and weird. Now it was her replacement. She stood, knocking over her coffee, heart jackhammering. She tried to log into the billing portal, locked out. Client project folders on Dropbox, gone. She opened her saved messages. One by one, Her client threads were empty, replaced by red receipts and a sea of silence. She ran to the kitchen, grabbed the tablet he never used, hoped he'd forgotten to sign out. He hadn't. There was nothing left. All her files his. All her systems his. Even her email signature was now a dead link. She leaned against the counter, chest heaving. The granite felt cold through her silk robe. And that's when she saw it, on the kitchen whiteboard they hadn't used in months. In George's careful, serif handwriting, "Control is invisible. Until it's gone." Her knees buckled. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a mistake. It was precision. And it had already started. By the time Chloe pulled into the bank's parking lot, her nails were bitten down to raw half-moons and the steering wheel had a permanent indentation from her white-knuckle grip. Her sunglasses barely masked the twitch in her left eye, and she hadn't showered, still in the same wine-stained sweater dress from the night before. The hem curled where she'd stepped on it in the driveway. She didn't care. She marched past the lobby fountain, heels clacking too loud on the tile. The receptionist smiled, bright, polite, oblivious. "I need access to our safety deposit box. It's under George and Chloe Heller," she said, flashing her ID like it was still supposed to mean something. The young teller, barely out of college, by the look of him, tapped at his terminal and paused. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You've been removed as an authorized user." Chloe blinked. "What?" He looked apologetic in that soft, corporate way that means absolutely nothing. "It says here your name was officially removed from access last Thursday. Do you have a court order or alternate documentation?" "Removed? I own that box. It's a joint account." He gave a measured smile. "Actually, it's listed under Heller Development Group, LLC. Mr. Heller is the sole managing partner. You are not on the business license." The room tilted. It took everything she had not to lose it right there in front of the fake ficus and laminated interest rate flyers. That box, that damn box, had held the skeletons. Tax archives, investment docs, backups of their house deed, and George's original business plans, which she used to call his nerdy treasure chest. Years ago, she'd tossed the keys into a dish and told him, "If the house burns down, you can rebuild from that box." And he had. Just not with her. She took a breath sharp enough to cut glass. "I want to see the contents." "Now." "I'm afraid that's not possible without his written consent," the clerk said, tone dipping into nervous territory. "Mr. Heller was in here last week with a notary. Everything's already been refiled." She stood there frozen, fists clenched so tight her rings dug into the meat of her fingers. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" the clerk added, clearly eager to pass her off to a manager. Chloe didn't answer. She walked out. And in the reflection of the glass door, she saw herself clearly for the first time, disheveled, alone, locked out of a life she didn't realize she never owned. She sat in the driver's seat for 15 minutes, engine off, car slowly heating like a greenhouse. It wasn't just the files. George had also moved the deed to their lake cabin into the LLC. She remembered scoffing when he filed the paperwork last fall. "Just another shell game for your taxes, babe," she had joked. He'd said nothing. Just smiled, the way he always did when she made herself feel clever at his expense. But now she saw it. Every form, every notarized signature, just a little asset reallocation for Q4, none of it had been casual. It had been surgical. And Chloe? She hadn't just lost her marriage. She'd lost the paper trail of her entire foundation. She wasn't locked out of George's life. She was locked out of her own. The subject line hit her inbox like a slap. Campaign mood boards? Was this meant for me? Chloe stared at it for a full minute before clicking. The sender was Francine Roach, her oldest client. Loyal since day one. Paid late, asked too many questions, still insisted on 15-minute Zoom calls just to see faces. But she'd stuck around when no one else did. Even recommended Chloe to her sister's winery in Santa Barbara. Inside the email was a single line. "I'm confused. This thread you sent about our campaign was meant for me?" Below it, hell itself. Forwarded. From Chloe's own email address. Dated 2 years ago. The subject line, "Jesus," Francine again faced with rolling eyes. The body. She's like a time capsule from 2009. Still wants sparkles and empowerment buzzwords. I swear if she says the word authentic one more time, I'll shove her brand guide into a blender. Cheap, needy, and 2 clients away from being fired. I only keep her because she pays in full and doesn't know what good design actually costs. Chloe's chest went ice cold. She hadn't written that recently. It was old. A vending email she'd sent to Kendra, her college friend who used to freelance retouching for her. It was buried in a long thread about impossible clients, TikTok trends, and whether brand loyalty even mattered anymore. It was supposed to be private. It was. She didn't even think she still had that email. And yet, there it was, forwarded from her own address. She checked the headers. The forwarding chain was scrubbed. No visible IPs. No device metadata. Just her name. She called Francine immediately. Voicemail. Then her second oldest client, Susan, the one with the vegan candle line. Blocked. A cold sweat broke across her back as she opened her inbox fully. One by one, responses started flooding in. Wow. Never expected this from you. Unprofessional doesn't even cover it. Consider this the end of our relationship. She scrambled to send apologies, but the damage was instantaneous. By 4:30 p.m., she'd been removed from 4 Slack groups, 2 client portals, and her scheduling app had 4 cancellations. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there, stunned, as her digital reputation, the one she'd cultivated with #polished grace and wine-fueled networking, burned. And underneath the panic, one bitter taste curled in her mouth. She knew who did it. George. She couldn't prove it. He'd never leave fingerprints. He was too careful, too calm. She could already hear his voice if she ever confronted him. You really think I'd stoop to that? With just enough sincerity to make anyone else doubt her. But she remembered how he used to help her reconcile receipts. How she gave him full access to her accounts because he's better with numbers. How he once warned her, offhandedly, you might want to clean out your sent folder. It's a graveyard in there. She hadn't listened. Why would she? She was the face, the charm, the talent. He was just the back end, the boring part. But now the back end was swallowing her whole. She stared at her screen, email after email lighting up with flames, her entire brand image collapsing under the weight of her own arrogance. It didn't matter how long ago she wrote it. It didn't matter if she was venting or joking or just tired after a long week. It was her name on it. And George? He didn't raise his voice. He didn't post screenshots. He didn't shame her publicly. He simply opened the vault and let her own words do the work. She was watching her life implode. And the most terrifying part? It was only Monday. By Friday morning, the group chat was a ghost town. The same chat that once exploded with daily memes, skincare gossip, and obnoxiously filtered brunch selfies had gone dead. No, good morning, Queen's hot beverage kiss mark. No jokes about Jenna's dating disasters. No passive-aggressive side jabs about who wore white to a birthday dinner. Just silence. Chloe scrolled up, searching for signs of life. Tuesday had one lone gif from Kendra, a squirrel holding a martini. No responses. Wednesday, total blackout. Thursday, Jenna posted a meme about protecting your peace, and nobody even reacted. It hung there like a corpse at a cocktail party. By Friday noon, the chat was renamed from Wine Coven Wineglass to just Group. By 1 p.m., it was gone altogether. She tried texting Denise directly. Hey babe, are we still on for Margs next week? No response. She checked Instagram. Denise's account? Still active. But Chloe wasn't following it anymore. Or rather, Denise wasn't following her. Same with Kendra. Same with Jenna. Same with all of them. The girls she'd toasted with, overshared with, vacationed in Tulum with. The ones who knew every fight she'd had with George, every complaint she'd whispered while sipping from stemless glasses under twinkling patio lights. They'd ghosted her. One by one. She refreshed her feed. Her followers had dropped by 28. Then 34. Then 41. A message came through from an unknown number. A local 323 area code. She opened it, hoping maybe someone finally had the decency to explain. You know, some of us like George. What you said wasn't cool. No name. No punctuation. Just that. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She started to type. I was drunk. It was a joke. You know how I am. But she stopped. Deleted it. Instead, she just sent back a single red heart emoji. Then she put the phone down and cried into her hands. Ugly, shaking, full-body sobs. The kind you can't Instagram. The kind that ruins your makeup and your self-image in the same breath. Because it wasn't just the loss of her marriage now. It wasn't just the work she'd built or the clients she'd charmed or the reputation George had disassembled like a quiet bomb technician. It was her tribe, her curated, filtered, brunch-drunk tribe. The women she always counted on to validate her snark, to clap back in her defense, to tell her she was right even when she was awful. They were gone too, because deep down, they knew. They always had. They saw what she did to George, even if they laughed along at the time. Even if they joined in with the jokes, the jabs, the stories that painted him as the quiet bore she carried on her back like some noble martyr. But when it came time to pick a side, they didn't pick her. They vanished. And for the first time in her adult life, Chloe felt what it meant to truly be alone. Not alone like a spa weekend or a wine break from people. Alone like standing in a crater, dust still falling, and realizing you were the one who triggered the explosion. Her phone sat beside her, silent. No pings. No girls. Just echoes. And Chloe knew. She hadn't just lost George. She'd lost the audience too. She was on her second glass of something cheap and desperate, boxed wine, half flat, when the knock came. Not loud. Not frantic. Just firm. She glanced out the window, assuming it was another courier with a brand return or some influencer junk she'd forgotten she ordered. Instead, it was a man in a windbreaker holding a beige envelope like it was radioactive. His expression was unreadable. Professional. Bored. Chloe Heller? She nodded, wine glass still in hand. You've been served. He turned and walked away before she could ask a single question. Inside the envelope, no letterhead, no friendly cover page, no polite legalese. Just raw documentation. Divorce. In bold, cold Helvetica. Filed 3 days prior. Filed before she even knew he was gone. The first few pages were standard. Legal boilerplate. Asset disclosures. Custody, non-applicable. No children. Not even a dog. Then came the financial breakdown. Brutal. Precise. Every joint account already frozen. Every vehicle retitled. The lake cabin, claimed by Heller Development Group. Their main residence, slated for sale, split 70/30ths, per the clause she drunkenly agreed to sign years ago when George handled the estate planning, because she couldn't be bothered. She laughed then. Whatever, babe. You're the architect. Build me a happy ending. He had, just not with her in it. She flipped another page and froze. Evidence. That was the header. What followed wasn't accusation. It was documentation. Audio files, transcribed and annotated. Chloe at a party. I married a spreadsheet with a pulse. Chloe to her friends on Zoom. He's like my dad. If my dad did nothing fun and stared at floor plans for intimacy. Chloe during a dinner at the lake. Sometimes I wish I had married Trevor. At least he was hot and didn't correct my grammar. Each entry dated. Each one followed by metadata. Screenshots came next. Text threads. Group chats. Even private DMs with her college roommate where she joked about how George's architect money bought her breast implants. And beneath it all, in crisp, lawyer-perfect print. This isn't about what you said when drunk. It's about everything you said when sober. Chloe stared at the paper as if it might morph into something kinder if she blinked hard enough. But it didn't. George hadn't filed in anger. He filed in preparation. This wasn't a tantrum. It was a strategy. She hadn't just been dropped. She'd been studied. And now? Now it was her words, her cruelty, her snide little jokes, her constant death by 1,000 jabs, that were being used like scalpels against her. No court needed. No judge. No jury. Just a welcome packet from the lawyer's office of the man she once mocked as too timid to ever leave. She set the papers down. The wine didn't taste like anything anymore. By Saturday morning, Chloe had crossed the line from stunned to frantic. She hadn't slept. The documents still sat spread across the kitchen island like a crime scene, pages wrinkled, wine-stained, one of them torn in half in a moment of shaking rage that left her with a small cut on her thumb and a matching streak of blood across the corner of Exhibit G. She hadn't changed clothes in 2 days. Her inbox was a wasteland. Her clients were silent, and her name, her brand, was radioactive. No one was returning messages, not even with the fake politeness she used to hate. So she did what desperate people do. She tried going through his people. She called his sister, Beth, straight to voicemail. She called again. Blocked. She tried his accountant, Jeremy, the awkward man with the slow drawl and the scratchy blazer who always chuckled nervously around her and brought pie to every meeting. Nothing. Even George's old college friend, Micah, the guy Chloe used to flirt with just to see if George would get jealous. Voicemail. Again. 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 Nothing. Even people she thought were hers stopped replying. A shared realtor. Their former contractor. The couple from their neighborhood wine night. Everyone had gone cold, like a coordinated act of polite excommunication. She sat in the hallway, phone still pressed to her ear, knees drawn up to her chest like a teenager locked out of a party. No sound. Just that endless-style tone that echoed her irrelevance. And then it bust. A text. No contact name. No number. Just, stop looking for me in the ruins. I didn't build them. 10 words. 10 quiet, final, lethal words. She stared at the screen for a full hour, motionless, knees aching on the tile, her spine pressed against the same wall George once leaned on as he watched her play hostess to their friends with a forced smile and silent grace. And now, the man she thought was too gentle to fight back, too dull to defend himself, had sent a message so devastating, so brutally composed, it cut deeper than anything she ever shouted in his face. Because it was true. He didn't destroy her life. He just left it exposed. He hadn't built the ruins. She had. Through every insult passed as humor, every backhanded compliment, every whispered jab to her friends when he left the room. Every time she rolled her eyes when he mentioned a new project or corrected her spelling or asked if they could talk instead of perform. She whispered to the empty hallway, to no one. I didn't think he'd actually go. But he had. Quietly. Completely. And the ruins he left behind? They weren't punishment. They were a mirror. The lake cabin hadn't changed. Same old cedar planks. Same porch swing that squeaked with each gust of wind. Same smell of pine and earth that used to wrap around them like a blanket when things were still whole. Chloe stood on the porch for several long minutes before knocking. Then tried the knob. It wasn't locked. That surprised her more than anything. She stepped inside, cautiously, like someone walking into a memory. The air smelled clean, too clean. The wood floors had been swept. The fireplace was freshly ashless. On the side table by the window, a small vase of white tulips sat in filtered sunlight, arranged just so. Her favorite flower, back when that had meant something. On the dining table, 2 coffee mugs, one half full. On the couch, George's old wool coat, folded perfectly, draped across the armrest like a memory he didn't want to forget, but wouldn't wear again either. And then she saw him, standing by the fire, calm, still, as if he had been waiting not for her, but for something else to end. He looked thinner, older, not broken, just quieter than silence. Her throat caught. She took one shaky step forward, eyes already glassing over. The ache in her chest bloomed like a bruise. George, she said, her voice low, cracked. Can we talk? He didn't speak, not even a twitch of the mouth. Instead, he slowly turned toward the hallway and pointed to the door. Chloe blinked, confused, then heard the soft click of heels. A woman stepped out. Late 40s. Crisp suit. No makeup. Binder in hand. Not young. Not romantic. Just official. Chloe's breath hitched. Who is it? She's here to witness, George said, his voice like sand across glass. First words he'd spoken to her in weeks. Maybe the last she'd ever hear from him. Chloe turned toward the woman. She recognized her. George's lawyer. The one from the packet. The one who'd made everything real. No, you don't need her here. I didn't come to talk about the papers. I came to talk about us. About what happened. But George didn't move. Didn't blink. He just kept his eyes on the fire. On something far beyond her reach. There is no us, Chloe. You can't mean that. I didn't mean it for 10 years. Those words hit harder than the papers. Harder than the inbox implosion or the empty safety deposit box. He wasn't angry. He wasn't gloating. He was simply done. She tried again. A weak laugh. George, come on. We were us. We were something. He finally looked at her. No, you were you. I was a mirror. Chloe felt herself sway, like the room had tilted. You don't just walk away from everything. He tilted his head slightly. You didn't think I'd go. You thought I'd wait. Like always. Silence. He gestured to the coffee table. A pen. A single page left unsigned. The final release. No more division of assets. No spousal support. No further communication needed beyond legal closures. She looked at it, then back at him. You're really doing this? I already did. But he raised one hand, gentle, firm. And for a moment, she saw it. Not the George she'd mocked. Not the dull man with quiet shoes and vanilla preferences. She saw the man who'd once watched her dance barefoot in this cabin, holding a bottle of cheap red wine and singing off-key. The man who'd built her a future and let her rewrite the script until she erased him entirely. And now? Now he was just here to confirm what she'd already buried under sarcasm and selfies. That it was over. Utterly. Finally. He turned back to the fire. Chloe looked around the cabin at the folded coat, the silent lawyer, the still coffee mug, and the weight of it all pressed into her chest like a sealed tomb. She signed, left the pen on the table, and walked toward the door. Just before stepping outside, she turned back. George. He didn't look. I didn't think you'd actually go. He didn't answer, because he already had. And as she stepped into the cold light of the afternoon, the wind catching her coat like a curtain falling on a final scene, she understood. The last door that closed wasn't his. It was the one in her own mind. And it would never open again. Don't touch me tonight. She didn't raise her voice when she said it. Just a breathy whisper into the dark, like she was informing the air, not the man lying next to her. But that one sentence landed harder than any fight they'd ever had. After 33 years of marriage, it wasn't the coldness that hurt. It was the practiced indifference. Like she'd said it before, in her head, 1,000 times. This was just the first time her lips had the courage to follow through. Listen, quick break. We set a goal to hit 10K subscribers. So tap subscribe if you're liking these wild stories of betrayal. Now let's get back to the madness. Paul blinked into the darkness. No anger. No confusion. Just a long, still moment where the truth stopped pretending to be subtle. He swung his legs out of bed, sat there for a second with his elbows on his knees, and stared at the hardwood floor. The same one he'd refinished himself last spring, while she was busy at her yoga retreat that ran conveniently every Thursday through Sunday for 6 weeks straight. He thought of the second wine glass in the dishwasher that always came back with lipstick on the rim. Thought of the random bruises she waved off as Pilates accidents. He thought of her whisper, "Don't touch me tonight," and how it sounded more like a line she'd rehearsed in front of the mirror than a request. So he stood up, put on that gray wool sweater she hated, said it made him look like a sad accountant. He zipped it all the way up, slid into his old slippers, and as he crossed the room, he leaned in, just close enough to let her feel the warmth of his breath on her shoulder, and whispered, "Goodbye." No drama, no luggage dragging, just that one word, dropped like a coin into the silence. She didn't even flinch, didn't roll over. Maybe she thought it was just theatrics. Maybe she thought he'd circle back like he always did, tail tucked, heart bleeding. But when she woke up in the morning, the bed beside her was still cold, his toothbrush gone, his watch drawer empty, and there was an odd stillness in the air, like the walls themselves were confused about who they belonged to now. Claire shuffled to the kitchen, robe barely tied, hair tangled, and eyes still foggy with sleep. She poured her coffee in autopilot mode, then glanced out the window to check the paper, and froze. Across the street, just outside the corner cafe, Paul was sitting at a table. With her, Diane, the sister Claire hadn't spoken to in over a decade. The one she told everyone had poisoned their father's will, manipulated the family, was dead to her. That Diane. And there she was, laughing, leaning across the table like she and Paul had shared 1,000 breakfasts together. Claire's hand trembled. The coffee mug inched toward the edge of the counter, forgotten. It wasn't the betrayal that knocked the wind out of her. It was the control she'd lost. The script had been flipped mid-act. Paul wasn't supposed to do anything. He was supposed to sulk, mope, sit in the living room chair like an abandoned puppy, waiting for her to toss him crumbs of affection. Instead, there he was, outside, in public, smiling, with the one person Claire had made sure was erased from their world. And here's the kicker. Their hands weren't touching. No scandalous embrace. No over-the-top gestures. Just two people sharing coffee. Calm. Intentional. Like they were exactly where they were supposed to be. Claire set the mug down. Slowly. eyes locked on the scene outside. Then she picked up her phone, tapped Paul's name. No answer. She sent a text. Why her? The three dots appeared, then disappeared. Message marked as read. And that was it. No explanation. No reaction. Just a man who had finally decided to stop begging for permission to be seen. And a woman who realized, too late, that the silence she'd treated him with for years had finally become contagious. There's a specific kind of nausea that comes when the past refuses to stay buried. Claire felt it spread slow and sour through her stomach as she stood at the window, watching Diane tilt her head back and laugh. That laugh, the one Claire used to mimic behind her back. Too loud, too dramatic, too thirsty for attention. And now it was echoing from across the street into Claire's curated little world, like someone had opened a sealed casket. Diane was supposed to be done. Excommunicated. After what happened with the inheritance, Claire had worked hard, surgically, to cut her sister from the family memory. When their father died and Diane refused to support Claire's version of the fair split, that was it. Line drawn. Goodbye, good luck, and good riddance. She'd told the kids Diane was unstable, that she had a breakdown, that she lashed out at family, said horrible things, stole things. Claire had always been so reasonable about it. We don't hate Diane, she'd say at the dinner table. She just needs help. And boundaries. What she never said, what she made sure no one ever found out, was that Diane hadn't stolen anything. She'd just read the will, out loud, in front of everyone. And it didn't match the version Claire had been peddling for months. But that was over 10 years ago. Long enough for Claire to weave a whole new mythology, for her kids to stop asking about Aunt Diane, and for Paul to conveniently forget there had ever been another side to the story. Except, apparently, he hadn't. Claire grabbed her phone off the granite island like it had personally insulted her. Dialed Paul. Straight to voicemail. No ring. Just the mechanical beep of rejection. Her lips curled. Coward. She texted instead. Short. Sharp. Why her? It showed read within seconds. And then nothing. No reply. No call. Not even the little typing dots. Just the quiet insult of being seen and still ignored. She stood there in silence, her thumb hovering over the screen like she might stab it back to life. The longer she watched, the worse it got. Diane leaned in close, said something that made Paul chuckle. His real chuckle, not the tired little breath he used at home when she forced him to laugh at her friend's terrible jokes. It was like watching two strangers perform a play she hadn't written. Claire's brain kicked into survival mode. Search. Dismiss. Dismantle. She pulled open Facebook. Diane's account was still public. Bad move. There was a photo from last week. A blurry shot of the lake. Caption. Found peace today. Claire scoffed. You found a therapist, maybe. Then she scrolled further. 10 days ago, a post with a book quote. Sometimes the only person who truly sees you is the one everyone warned you about. One like. From Paul. Claire's stomach twisted. It wasn't the like itself, it was the timestamp. 10 days ago. Before the whisper. Before the sweater. Before goodbye. Her mouth went dry. She tapped into Paul's Google Calendar. He hadn't changed the sharing permissions. Monday, coffee with D. Wednesday, walk, 10 a.m., same place. Friday, groceries for D's place. Are you? She whispered, the sentence dying in her throat. This wasn't a whim. This wasn't revenge. This was already a thing. Claire dropped the phone onto the counter and braced herself against the sink. Her reflection in the dark window glass looked warped. Hollow. Diane was supposed to be the ghost. The one Claire erased. But now she was back. And she wasn't haunting. She was rebuilding. With him. And worst of all, he looked happy doing it. The kettle whistled, shrill and insistent, but Claire didn't move. She just stood at the stove, staring into nothing, fingers twitching at the hem of her sleeve like she was trying to rub away a thought. She hadn't eaten all day. Coffee had become a meal substitute, and her appetite was buried somewhere beneath a growing knot of dread and something uglier, humiliation. From behind her came the shuffle of socks on tile. Her daughter's voice, casual, almost sing-song. I saw Dad with Aunt Diane today. Claire turned so fast the kettle nearly fell. Where? Cafe across from the bookstore. Her daughter, Rachel, poured orange juice like it was any other Tuesday. They looked close. The word scraped something inside Claire. They're not close. She's manipulating him. Diane always had that talent. Rachel glanced up, expression unreadable. He looked happier than I've seen in years. Claire's jaw tightened. That woman has caused nothing but pain for this family. You were too young to remember what she did. Rachel raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The silence pressed in hard, the kind that made Claire's temples throb. I'm just saying, Claire continued, a little too loud. Don't be fooled. Your father's vulnerable. He's not thinking straight. Rachel sipped her juice. He didn't seem confused. He seemed calm. Claire wanted to scream. Instead, she busied her hands, snatching mugs off the rack, wiping a perfectly clean counter. Anything to stop the itch building in her throat. Rachel left without another word, and Claire was alone again. But the quiet didn't last. That night, as she passed the den on her way to bed, she paused. The door was slightly ajar. A soft blue glow flickered from inside. She pushed it open an inch more. Her son, Lucas, sat cross-legged in front of the TV, a box of old DVDs beside him. Their old home movies. Footage Paul had meticulously converted from dusty tapes, most of which Claire had mentally archived as dull background noise. But not to Lucas. He was watching only the ones with Paul. There was Paul teaching him how to tie a fishing knot. Paul building a tree house while Lucas sat on the beam handing him nails. Paul holding a toddler Rachel in the pool, laughing like he'd just discovered joy for the first time. Claire's voice was in some of them, floating from behind the camera. But even to her own ears, she sounded distant. Corrective. Like a director, not a participant. She leaned against the wall. Why these? She asked. Lucas didn't look up. Just needed something good tonight. Claire stepped into the room. We have tons of family videos. The holidays, your graduation. Why just these? He paused the DVD, turned. Because he was there, Mom. Like, actually there. Not on his phone. Not in another room. Just with us. She felt her throat constrict. He still sends me dumb dad jokes, Lucas added quietly. Even now. Claire smiled tightly. Well, of course he does. He doesn't know how to let go. Lucas nodded. Yeah, but maybe that's not always a flaw. Claire opened her mouth to retort, then stopped. Because on the paused screen behind him, Paul was kneeling in the yard, holding a wobbly bike steady while a much younger Lucas pedaled forward, laughing. She remembered that day. Not because of the joy, but because she left halfway through to take a business call that lasted an hour. And Paul had never said a word about it. Now here they were, years later, and her children, were beginning to rearrange the story she had so carefully written. Suddenly, Claire felt the room tilt. Not physically, but emotionally. Like the weight of her version of the past was slipping, slow and inevitable, from her grasp. Because what happens when your own kids start to rewrite the history you spent years curating? You realize you're not the narrator anymore. Just another unreliable character in someone else's retelling. The GPS landed her at a modest craftsman-style rental tucked into a quiet cul-de-sac just past the lake. Diane's car was in the driveway. Claire recognized it instantly. Same scratch bumper from a parking lot fender bender in 2009. Some things never changed. Claire didn't knock. She didn't plan to. She marched up the porch steps and opened the front door like she still had the moral right to do it. The audacity. The older woman sunbathing in her own pride like it was sunscreen. Inside, the air was thick with jasmine and something baked, lemon, maybe. The kind of cozy domestic scent that hit too hard when you were the outsider. Framed prints on the walls. Soft music playing from another room. It was, Claire realized, unsettlingly warm. She found Diane in the living room, barefoot, on a couch that looked newer than anything Claire had seen her sister own before. She was folding laundry. Like some smug housewife in a detergent commercial. Diane looked up without surprise. Well, she said, calm as ever. The dead do rise. You're not part of this family, Claire hissed, voice like ice slicing through glass. Diane didn't flinch. She held up a neatly folded dish towel, then set it down with the others. Funny. Because lately, it feels like I'm the only one anyone remembers. Claire stepped forward. Don't flatter yourself. You crawled back into his life because you smelled blood. Oh, honey, Diane said, standing, tone dropping like a guillotine. You bled him out for years. I just showed up with a bandage. Before Claire could launch her next grenade, footsteps sounded behind her. Paul. He came in from the hallway carrying a simple ceramic mug, green and handmade. The kind he used to buy at local art fairs before Claire said they clashed with the kitchen. He didn't look startled. Just tired. You came uninvited, Claire, he said. Calm. Measured. Like this was the fourth intrusion, not the first. I'm here because you're being manipulated, she snapped. She's wrapping herself around you like some tragic savior. You think she cares? You think this is about you? Paul sipped. Maybe it is. Or maybe she saw me when you stopped looking. The words hung there. Not shouted. Not spiteful. Just a flat, undeniable truth that landed like a dull blade. Claire's face twisted. You think you're special now? That she loves you? Paul tilted his head slightly. I think I stopped needing to be tolerated. Claire scoffed. This is pathetic. But no one argued with her. No one begged her to stay. She turned to leave, fists clenched, rage bubbling with nowhere to go. And then, just as she reached the threshold, her eyes caught a small wooden side table near the door. On it stood a frame. Photo inside. Diane and Paul. Sitting by the lake. He was in the same sweater she once called sad accountant. His arm was around her shoulders. They were both laughing, mid-moment, unscripted and real. Claire stared. The picture wasn't just new, it was framed. Not a phone screen. Not a memory card. It had been printed. Chosen. Displayed. She stepped out onto the porch, air suddenly thick, lungs tight. The door clicked shut behind her. And for the first time in decades, Claire felt it. Not anger. Not fear. Something sharper. Jealousy. Not because Diane had Paul, but because Diane saw him. And Claire had spent years pretending he was invisible. Claire poured herself a second glass of Chardonnay and sat down at the kitchen island like she was preparing for surgery. Laptop open. Phone charged. Notepad ready. She didn't even bother turning on the lights. The glow of the screen illuminated her well enough, casting long, tired shadows across the granite countertops. She opened her contacts. Scrolled. Stopped. Marilyn. Old friend. Well, former friend. They hadn't spoken in over a year, but Marilyn still floated in the same orbit. Charity committees, HOA drama, those forced fancy fundraisers where everyone smiled through clenched Botox. Claire hit call before she could talk herself out of it. Claire, Marilyn answered, confused, but polite. I need to ask you something, Claire said, voice tight. No preamble. A pause. Okay. Did you know about Paul and Diane? Another pause. Longer. Marilyn exhaled. Look, I don't know what I know, but I always suspected she kept tabs on him. Quietly, Claire's hand froze on her wine glass. What do you mean, kept tabs? I mean, she never let go, Marilyn said, her voice low now. I'd see her ask around at events. Not obviously. She was subtle, always asking how he was holding up, always phrasing it like it was concern, not whatever this is. Claire didn't respond. Marilyn filled the silence with the worst possible sentence. Honestly, I think she always liked him better than she liked you. The line went dead a few seconds later. Claire hung up before the burn in her throat could climb into her voice. She pushed the wine away, opened her inbox instead. Search, Paul. Hundreds of results. Most were receipts, joint billing, reminders from Costco and the vet. But buried deeper were forwarded threads. Threads she'd never looked at before. Jokes he'd sent to friends. Short responses. Soft gratitude. She clicked through old photos. Trips she'd forgotten they'd even taken. There was Paul, arm around her at a beach rental. His smile half forced, hers tight and posed. There was another album, Christmas 4 years ago. Rachel had just come home from college. Claire had been too busy talking to a colleague about bonuses. But Diane had commented on the album. Claire scrolled, fast, hunting. And then, there it was. A photo from their 30th anniversary dinner. Candles. Red wine. Paul looking off camera, like something had just broken his focus. Claire had captioned it. 30 years, 3 houses, 2 kids, 1 husband who still wears sneakers to dinner. Diane's comment was buried under dozens of likes and heart emojis. But it stood out. He deserved more than what you gave. Claire froze. It wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. Just a quiet little scalpel of a sentence, sharp and surgical. No emojis. No fanfare. Just that. No one had liked it. But it hadn't been deleted either. Claire opened group chats next. The old ones, family threads, couple groups, friend circles long since ghosted. She searched for Diane. Nothing incriminating. No confessions. No flirtation. Just silence. Which was worse. Because it meant everything had been off-grid. Private. Real. She wanted a thread to pull. A crack in the foundation. Instead, she found nothing but her own absence. Holes where she should have noticed Paul slipping away. Places she thought she was managing the marriage, but was really just managing appearances. Claire slammed the laptop shut. No leverage. No dirt. Just a decade's worth of ignored signs. She sat in the dark, the last of the wine untouched, and realized something that chilled her more than Diane's smirk ever could. She'd spent years assuming silence meant loyalty. But maybe, all this time, it was simply distance. And someone else had quietly filled that space. Claire dusted off the linen napkins she hadn't used since Rachel's graduation and lit the overpriced candles from that boutique near the spa. She roasted the lemon-thyme chicken Paul used to rave about, back when he still complimented anything she did, and decanted a bottle of red she'd been saving for a night that mattered. Tonight mattered. She was going to fix this. Reclaim the narrative. Remind the kids, gently, of course, who their mother was, the center of gravity in this family. The calm, rational one. The provider. The one who never cracked, even when everyone else did. By 6:30, the table was immaculate. Handwritten name cards, Rachel's idea from childhood, matching glassware, placed settings so symmetrical they could have been military. And at 7 sharp, the doorbell rang. Rachel came in first, hair up, holding a store-bought pie. Claire clocked that immediately. Not homemade. Lucas followed, still wearing his campus hoodie, taller than Paul now, but with his father's soft eyes. They hugged her, made small talk. The air felt normal for 5 minutes. Until the dinner started talking back. So, I saw Dad yesterday, Lucas said, somewhere between salad and entree. Claire paused mid-slice. Oh, he seems good, Lucas continued. Said Diane's helping him landscape that new place. Claire kept her smile on. Of course she is. She's always been good at digging. Rachel laughed, not at the comment, but like she was remembering something. You know what's weird? I actually liked when Diane used to babysit us. I remember it being so calm. Claire blinked. Calm? She once lost you at the library. Rachel shook her head. No, that was you. You left to take a call and forgot I was in the kids section. Silence. Claire's fork hit the plate too hard. She's manipulating your father, Claire snapped. Always has. You don't know what she's capable of. She's capable of listening, Lucas said, tone careful. Dad talks around her in a way I've never heard before. Claire's voice went thin. You've been seeing them regularly? Rachel shrugged. We've had lunch a few times. She told me about Grandpa's will. Her version doesn't sound crazy. Because liars don't always shout. Claire hissed. Sometimes they smile while they dismantle everything. Lucas looked up. Maybe they're just done pretending. That sentence landed like a grenade with the pin pulled too late. Claire sat back. The candles flickered in the dead quiet that followed. Nobody picked up their forks. Nobody reached for the wine. Rachel looked down at her lap. Lucas stared at his mother like he was seeing something he didn't want to name. Claire finally stood. Well, she said, wiping her hands on a napkin with slow precision. I guess next time, I won't bother with dinner. Rachel stood too. You don't have to bother. We'd still come. But it didn't sound like comfort. It sounded like a truce in a war where the borders had already moved. They left before dessert. The pie stayed on the counter, unopened. That night, Claire sat in the same seat at the same table, staring at the empty plates, and realized something terrifying. She'd invited them to remind them who she was. Instead, they reminded her who she wasn't anymore. And once the mask cracked, even slightly, there was no unseeing the woman underneath. It came in a plain white envelope. No return address. No markings except Paul's full name, still listed at the house they used to share. Claire found it wedged between a Costco coupon packet and an alumni newsletter she hadn't read in years. She nearly tossed it with the junk until her eye caught the handwriting. Diane's. Not loopy like Rachel's or blocky like Lucas's, but deliberate, fluid, familiar in a way that made Claire's stomach tighten on instinct. She stared at it for a long moment, thumb hovering. Then she peeled the flap open without hesitation. Inside was a single sheet of thick paper, heavier stock than normal mail. Expensive. Tactile. It wasn't a letter. It was a deed. A real estate deed. Claire's heart dropped into her gut as her eyes scanned the details. Parcel number 411-08, L, Lot 12, Lake Shoreline District. Transfer of ownership to Paul J. Harmon. Lake Shoreline. Their lake. She remembered it immediately, the place Paul used to talk about retiring near. He'd even shown her listings once, years ago, before she shut the conversation down with a scoff. We're not lake people, Paul. That's for people who wear Crocs and drink boxed wine. He never brought it up again. But clearly, someone else had listened. There was a note, folded neatly inside. No greeting. No date. Just 2 lines in that same elegant, quiet hand. Let's make this home. You were never the problem. Claire read it again. Then again. Each repetition hit harder. This wasn't a rebound. This wasn't a weekend fling or a petty soap opera triangle. Diane had bought him a home. Not an apartment. Not a rental. A permanent place with his name on it. Like she was laying down bricks on a future Claire never gave him. Claire's knees buckled, and she gripped the edge of the kitchen island, the paper trembling in her hands like it was hot to the touch. This wasn't a flirtation. It was a plan. She stumbled into the living room, sat hard on the couch, and placed the deed on the coffee table like it might explode. Her hands felt numb. Her face flushed with a cold heat she couldn't place. She'd mocked Diane for being dramatic, mocked Paul for being passive, mocked everyone for being too sentimental, too easily impressed, too soft. And now she sat alone, in the house she once curated like a museum, while someone else carved a place for him at the edge of a lake with dock chairs, quiet mornings, and probably one of those wind chimes Paul used to love until she made him take it down. A faint wind brushed the curtains. Outside, a dog barked, distant and indifferent. Claire leaned forward and touched the note again. You were never the problem. The phrase clawed at something deep inside her. Because it didn't just reframe the last year. It rewrote the entire marriage. Paul wasn't drifting. He was escaping. And Diane wasn't just there to catch him. She'd built a landing pad. Claire let out a dry, soundless laugh that turned into a sharp breath. For the first time, she wasn't angry. She was outplayed. And for a woman who spent her life controlling every scene, every headline, every version of every story, nothing burned more than realizing someone else had written the final chapter and mailed it straight to her front door. Claire didn't even bother calling ahead. She didn't want to give him time to prepare, or worse, to retreat. She wanted to catch him midlife, in the middle of whatever pathetic fantasy Diane was feeding him. She wanted to see the mess, the peeling wallpaper of some second-rate rental, the reality behind the little dream they were trying to stitch together with lakefront postcards and weak sentimentality. The tires crunched hard against the gravel as she pulled into the narrow driveway. The house was smaller than she expected. Humble. One story with faded siding, like it knew not to pretend to be anything it wasn't. Paul answered the door in jeans and a plain white tee. Barefoot. Holding a wooden spoon, as if she just interrupted him stirring a pot of soup. She pushed past him without waiting for permission. You need to come home, she said, brushing past the smell of basil and something rich on the stove. And stop this charade before it embarrasses everyone. Paul didn't raise his voice. Didn't even close the door. He just set the spoon on the counter and turned to face her. I am home. Claire froze for half a beat. I mean our home, Paul. He tilted his head, like he was examining a patient. You mean the place where we share a roof and nothing else? She crossed her arms. You're not thinking clearly. She's manipulated you into some half-baked. She's the only person who's ever let me speak without interrupting. His tone was still soft. Almost bored. You didn't lose me to a seduction. You lost me to a conversation. Claire's mouth opened, but no words came out. So she defaulted to what always worked before. The kids need stability, she snapped. You walking out like this, you're damaging them. Paul gave a small, weary smile. They're coming with me this weekend. She blinked. Excuse me. He walked over to a small clipboard on the entryway table. Diane's organizing a tree planting weekend at the cabin. Lucas is bringing his guitar. Rachel's making a photo album. They're excited. Claire's lip curled. You're using them to prove a point. No, he said. You use them as props. I'm just finally listening to them. Her fists clenched at her sides. So what? This is your big stand? Abandon the life we built because your ego got hurt. No, Paul said. I'm not standing up. I'm walking away. And it took me too long. Claire's eyes darted around the room. It was clean. Lived in. There were books on the shelves, books he'd never had room for at the house because the decor needed balance. A cheap rug with a coffee stain. A Polaroid of him and Diane tacked to the fridge, mid-laugh, his head tilted back like he hadn't smiled properly in years. Claire stepped toward the door, her voice a last weapon. You really think this version of your life is going to last? Paul turned to her with an expression she hadn't seen in over a decade. Peace. It already is. She walked out in silence, her heels clicking like punctuation marks behind her. No one chased her. No one begged her to stay. And that silence? It wasn't indifference. It was freedom, and it was deafening. Claire set the dining room table for one that morning. She didn't plan to eat there, but the act of arranging the silverware gave her a sense of ritual, a sense of relevance. It was Paul's 65th birthday. For 34 of them, she'd planned everything, every dinner reservation, every group photo, every polite toast. Even the cakes, which she didn't bake herself, of course, but sourced from upscale patisseries that matched her taste for restraint and Instagram-worthy minimalism. He never wanted much. A book, a walk, a call from the kids. Quiet, in other words. But this birthday was supposed to be different. A milestone. The kind that demanded reflection, gratitude, maybe even forgiveness. She kept her phone close all morning. Nothing. By noon, she paced the kitchen under the soft hum of the fridge, refreshing her text like she was checking a wound. Lucas hadn't messaged. Rachel had posted a photo of a coffee mug and a lake view to her story. No caption. Claire didn't like what that implied. By 3 p.m., the tension in her jaw had locked into something permanent. At 5:47 p.m., she called Rachel. No answer. At 6:12, she sent a group message. Let me know if you're doing something for your dad tonight. I'll stop by. No reply. She made herself a salad she didn't touch. Poured a glass of wine she didn't drink. By 8:40, she told herself she didn't care. By 8:42, she was back on Facebook. That's when she saw it. A tag. Rachel had uploaded a photo album. Dad's 65th, Lake Day. Claire clicked. The first photo was Paul, standing on the porch of the lake cabin. Diane beside him, hand on his shoulder, the sun catching in her silver-streaked hair like something out of a Hallmark movie. Lucas was on a hammock with his guitar. Rachel was lighting candles on a cake. Chocolate, homemade, uneven icing. Not curated. Not styled. Just real. One photo showed the whole group sitting around a longwood table. Everyone smiling, Rachel mid-laugh, Diane leaning into Paul like she belonged there, like she'd always belonged there. But it was the close-up of the birthday card that ended Claire. White cardstock, blue ink. To the man who taught us quiet doesn't mean weak. Happy birthday. No signature. No hint of irony. Just love. Honest. Intimate. Claire stared at it for a long time. Then scrolled through the comments. One from Rachel. Still the best laugh I know. One from Lucas. Glad we finally got you to stop pretending you were okay. You deserve this. Claire shut her laptop slowly. Got up. Walked into the living room. And sat in the dark. There was no anger this time. No accusations lined up in her throat. Just the bone-deep ache of being forgotten by the people you raised, erased by the person you discarded, replaced in a space you didn't even know you were losing. She wasn't invited. Not because they forgot, but because they'd moved on and no longer needed her to explain why their father wasn't happy. They had seen it for themselves. And now, they were writing their own story, without her pen. Sunday morning. Sunlight sharp through the windshield, coffee cooling untouched in the cup holder, and Claire's hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. She had no plan, no errands, no charity brunch, no manufactured obligation. Just this, parked across the street from that same little cafe, engine off, eyes locked on the patio like a ghost haunting her own life. They arrived at 9:07. Same time every week. Diane stepped out first, hair pulled back, linen shirt fluttering slightly in the breeze. Then Paul. Slower now, but not hunched like he used to be. Not tired. Just deliberate. Present. Claire's stomach flipped when she saw the ring. Simple. Silver. No diamonds. No grandiosity. Just there. On that hand. He opened the cafe door for Diane. She smiled up at him, said something Claire couldn't hear, and he laughed. Really laughed. That familiar low rumble she used to hear through bathroom doors and in grocery aisles when the kids were small and he still found the world amusing. They took the same table. The corner one with the chipped green paint on the edge, where Paul could see the window and Diane could watch the street. They didn't look at their phones. They didn't check the time. They just sat, like people who had nowhere better to be. And then Rachel. Claire spotted her car before she even parked. Then Lucas, arriving a minute later on foot with that beat-up duffel bag slung over his shoulder. They hugged Diane first. Not awkward, not out of politeness. Full hugs. The kind with history. Then Paul. Lucas said something, and everyone laughed. Even Paul, head tilted back, hand briefly on his son's shoulder. Claire sat perfectly still. She didn't even notice the condensation dripping from her coffee cup until it soaked into her slacks. She thought, maybe they'll see me. Maybe they'll wave. Maybe they'll remember I was the one who held this family together. But no one turned. No one scanned the street like they were missing something. Because they weren't. They had everything they needed at that table. And Claire? She had a steering wheel and a front row seat to her own erasure. What haunted her in that moment wasn't the fact that Paul had moved on. It was who he'd moved on with. Diane. The sister Claire had labeled broken, vindictive, pitiful, beneath her. But Diane had done what Claire never could. She had seen Paul, not the version Claire curated, not the utility, not the accessory to his social life, but the man, the person. And she hadn't just patched him up. She rebuilt him. Stronger. More himself. Claire's breath caught in her throat as she watched Rachel pass Paul a notebook. He flipped it open, smiling as Diane leaned in to read. Claire remembered giving him a leather-bound journal one year, monogrammed, expensive. He never wrote a word in it. Said he didn't have anything to say. Apparently, he just didn't have anyone to say it to. And now, he did. She didn't cry. Didn't scream. Didn't throw the coffee cup at the dashboard or punch the steering wheel or call Diane's phone in a final act of desperation. She just sat there, hands on the wheel, watching the one person she had spent a lifetime writing off build something real from the ruins she left behind. No final words. No last act. Just quiet. Which, as it turned out, wasn't weakness. It was her ending. My kids prefer him now. Not our kids. My kids. She said it like she was ordering coffee. No eye contact. Just scrolling through her phone while the crust of her avocado toast went limp on her plate. I'll be taking them, she added, like this was a trip to the mall and not a full-scale parental heist. They're happier with Ryan. Across the table, our daughter stiffened mid-bite. Our son blinked like he misheard. And me? I just took one more sip of black coffee. Still hot. Still bitter. Kind of like me. I didn't ask her to repeat herself. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't do the things she probably prepped for with her therapist or her book club. Let's be mature, Melissa. He'll get angry, play the victim, cry about the kids. Nah. I just cleared my plate, wiped the counter, and gave her a look so empty it made her blink. That look, it did something. For the first time in months, she actually paused. Her thumbs hovered over the phone. You're not going to say anything? Nothing worth repeating, I said, placing the dish into the sink. Greg, she said with that familiar voice, half scolding, half smug, oh Melissa. You do realize they prefer being around someone who actually gets them? Someone younger, more fun, more present. Present. That one hit differently, I'll admit. Because for years I was present. Every game, every recital, every Sunday night science project she forgot about. But I guess being present doesn't count when you don't post it on Instagram with matching family sweaters and a motivational quote underneath. The thing about Melissa, she doesn't just want to win. She wants the appearance of winning. That's why Ryan is perfect for her. He's got that fake deep thing going for him. Wears cologne with a name like Elemental. Calls himself a consultant, which is code for unemployed but good at networking brunches. The kids probably think he's a walking TED Talk, until they realize he still lives in a rental with LED lights in every room. Ryan listens to them, she continued, clearly mistaking my silence for surrender. He actually knows what's going on in their lives. You don't even ask them how school was. That one made me laugh. Not out loud. Just a small breath through the nose kind of laugh. Because it's funny what she thinks she knows. She doesn't know that 3 weeks ago, Henry handed me a note he was too scared to show her. He failed a quiz. Asked me not to tell. I didn't. We studied flashcards every evening while she was working late. She doesn't know that Emma came into my room last Thursday night because she had a nightmare. I sat up with her, quietly humming the same Fleetwood Mac song Melissa used to sing when she still remembered to care. She doesn't know that I've been listening for a while now. Recording, even. Notes, dates, phrases. Enough to make a judge raise an eyebrow. Enough to notice a shift, how the kids hesitate around her. How they flinch when Ryan raises his voice, which happens more than she wants to admit. She thinks I've been sleepwalking through this divorce. She thinks I'm going to lie down and get steamrolled, like some sad sack in a flannel shirt watching his life unravel. But I've got news for her. She's not the only one who planned something. "Greg, don't be like this," she said when I didn't answer. I turned and looked at her for a long second. "Like what?" "Passive-aggressive. You're acting like a martyr." I smiled. "Nope. Martyrs die. I'm just reorganizing." She didn't like that. Her jaw twitched. The air got thick. The kids stayed silent, staring at their cereal like the marshmallows were floating landmines. And then, just to twist the knife in a way only Melissa could, she added, "You know, this is why they don't talk to you. You always make things uncomfortable." Uncomfortable. Right. I guess comfort is more important than truth these days. I walked over to the fridge, pulled out my lunch for work, zipped the bag shut, and said one last thing before walking out. "Well, tell Ryan he's got 2 weeks to learn algebra, carpool routes, and how to get Emma to take her asthma meds on time. Oh, and maybe look into food allergies." Henry's changed his reaction to walnuts lately. Wouldn't want a fun parent to miss that. Then I left. No door slam. No speech. Just the faint sound of her spoon hitting ceramic as I closed the door behind me. That morning, she thought she won. But that was the first move on a board I'd already built. Every piece in place. And I don't play games I don't know how to win. By the end of that week, Melissa had already rewritten the entire narrative in her head and then broadcasted it to anyone with ears, a wine glass, or a group chat login. Greg agreed. No fight. Honestly, I think he's relieved, she told her sister Kendra over drinks at Olive Garden, like this was some low-stakes life update and not an emotional assassination. I mean, he's always been more into spreadsheets than soccer games. I think parenting tired him out. Kendra, who still owed me $200 from a short-term loan 6 years ago, nodded with that fake supportive expression she always wore when she smelled gossip but not responsibility. "I always said Ryan was more involved," she offered, swirling her Moscato like it was a crystal ball. Melissa laughed. "Please. Ryan is involved. He's reading the 4 agreements. He has values. He connects with them. Henry actually asked him about shaving tips. Can you believe that?" Sure I could. Because I told Henry how to shave 3 months ago. With a real razor. Not Ryan's electric beard massager that looks like something from a Sky Mall catalog. But she didn't stop there. No, Melissa went full PR campaign. She posted a photo of Ryan and the kids at the local pumpkin patch, captioned, "Fall memories with the ones who matter most, Maple Leaf Sparkles #blended blessings," like she was running for Stepmom of the Year. Like I was already a shadow. Like I didn't exist. At school pickup, she introduced Ryan as Henry and Emma's bonus dad to Mrs. Langley, the 3rd-grade teacher with a gossip addiction and a minivan that smelled like expired ambition. Ryan, ever the performative gentleman, handed out organic lollipops while wearing a Patagonia vest and a $300 smile. The other moms chuckled. The dad stayed quiet. But people started noticing. "Is Greg okay with all this?" One mom whispered to Melissa at drop-off. "Oh, completely," she said, like she was reciting a script. "He's always been hands-off. More into work. He's a good guy, just, dull. Dull. That's the word she leaned on. Not distant. Not neglectful. Dull. Because dull is safe to say in public. Dull won't raise red flags. Dull doesn't trigger custody battles." It makes her sound gracious. Like she tried. But here's the funny part. While she was out there smiling through her teeth and soaking in hollow praise, I was getting text messages. From her friends. From our old neighbors. From the PDA mom who once asked me for printer ink and now wanted to check in. "Hey Greg, just heard. I'm surprised. You were always so involved. You doing okay? This seems sudden. Wasn't it you who helped Emma build that solar system project? The one with the spinning rings?" "Yeah, that was me. I even spray-painted Saturn's rings in the garage with a coat hanger and a lazy Susan. Melissa told everyone she did it herself. Forgot to mention she was 2 glasses of Pinot and when I hot-glued the final orbit. Melissa didn't notice the shift, how the comments were changing. One afternoon, at the school fundraiser, she handed Ryan the raffle basket and loudly said, "Come on, stepdad, time to impress the crowd." One of the board members turned to me, eyebrows raised. "That her boyfriend?" I nodded. "She always said you did the budget planning," she murmured. That huh was the beginning of erosion. Quiet, subtle, but enough. Because Melissa built her empire on the assumption that silence equals surrender. That because I wasn't arguing, I wasn't noticing. She forgot I used to run logistics for emergency transport, meaning I was trained to stay calm while people screamed. I knew how to work behind noise. I knew how to make a plan in the middle of chaos and wait for the right time to execute. And while she was orchestrating her public victory lap, I was sitting in the bleachers at Henry's game, talking to his coach. The one who'd heard Ryan bark at him during warm-ups. The one who remembered me showing up every Saturday with snacks, sunscreen, and a folding chair that didn't squeak. The coach asked me one question that night. "So, is he really replacing you?" I didn't answer. Just looked at the field. Because the more Melissa bragged, the less she saw the cracks forming beneath her. That's the thing about illusions. They shimmer right before they shatter. Saturday morning, 7:42 a.m. Melissa thinks I'm doing what I always do, Home Depot, coffee, maybe wandering the aisles of the hardware store like a widower looking for meaning between socket wrenches and fertilizer. She doesn't ask anymore. She assumes I've accepted my role in the slow fade-out she's orchestrating. The boring ex-husband who will quietly hand over the kids like spare change. But here's the thing. I stopped going to Home Depot 3 weeks ago. Instead, I've been driving 37 minutes across town to sit at a picnic table behind a community library, sipping coffee with Daniel Pierce, a retired child psychologist who owes me a favor from a decade ago when his sump pump died in the middle of winter and I had it fixed within the hour. Daniel's 74 now. Sharp as hell. Looks like an aging jazz saxophonist, but speaks like a cross-examiner. He never asks what happened. He just waits until I start talking. And when I do, he scribbles in a tiny leather notebook he refuses to replace. Observations. Patterns. Phrases the kids repeated. "She said you're too boring." "Ryan says you forget things." "Mom told us not to tell." I say them slowly, calmly. Daniel only looks up once. When I mention the line Emma used last Tuesday, Ryan says Dad can't handle real-life stuff. Daniel doesn't speak for a minute. Then he says, "That's not a child's language. That's borrowed vocabulary. Coached, even. She's 9, Greg. Her world should be questions, not script." On another Saturday, I sit across from a man named Leo Mendez, former judge. Family court. We met once at a barbecue 5 years ago. His wife was obsessed with Melissa's dip. He remembered me. Said he always thought I was unusually composed. He drinks his espresso like it's whiskey and doesn't blink much. I slide over a folder. Inside, attendance records, after-school activity forms, medical history logs, all signed by me. Melissa's name appears maybe 3 times in 8 months. Start collecting daily schedules, Leo says. Pickup times. Drop-offs. Who cooks? Who buys groceries? You'd be amazed what courts consider involvement. And Greg, he leans in. Don't talk about her unless they ask. Just show what you've done, what you're doing. That's how you win custody without ever raising your voice. Melissa has no idea. On Sundays, I meet Claire at a tiny cafe 2 towns over. She's not a lawyer. She's better, an assistant to one. The kind who actually reads every page, knows every loophole, and already dislikes Melissa from the one PDA mixer where Melissa called her clipboard girl. Claire brings me files, guides, a binder, tabs in red for priorities, green for strategy. She's meticulous, deadly quiet. She teaches me how to write affidavits that don't sound like accusations but facts, how to frame each entry like a narrative judges prefer, neutral, grounded, evidence-based. She tells me not to use phrases like "she ruined my life" or "she brainwashed the kids." Instead, on April 3rd, the children returned home visibly distressed after an unannounced visit from Mr. Ryan. Emma was tearful. Henry refused dinner. It's not emotion. It's documentation. Every evening, I go home like nothing happened. I eat dinner with the kids. I let Melissa pretend I'm shrinking. I let her play queen of a kingdom I've already redrawn on paper. She walks in one night, finds me writing something at the kitchen counter. What's that? Meal plan, I say. Emma's getting pickier. She rolls her eyes. She's just being dramatic. You're overthinking. I nod. She doesn't notice the notebook I close has 3 columns labeled: incident, witness, timestamp. She doesn't know I bought a second phone. She doesn't know the security system I installed logs audio in the foyer. She doesn't know the kids have been drawing pictures lately, pictures that tell stories. Pictures Daniel has been quietly analyzing. She doesn't ask where I go on Saturdays. If she did, I might say, out. And that'd be true. I'm out of the fog. Out of the role she cast me in. Out of patience. But mostly, I'm out to win. Not in court. Not just there. I'm out to prove, in the clearest, coldest terms possible, that I was never boring. Just quiet. And she mistook quiet for weak. It happened on a Tuesday, during dinner. Just spaghetti and frozen garlic bread. The kind you toss in the oven and pretend is home-cooked. Melissa was working late, again, which meant the house was mine for the evening. The kids were talking more freely lately without her around. No tight smiles, no exaggerated cheerfulness. Just relaxed. Until Henry said it. He was mid-forkful, not even thinking. That's the thing about kids. They don't know when they're revealing something heavy. They just say it, and then chew. Mom says you're too boring, he mumbled, poking at a meatball. I didn't flinch. I didn't even stop buttering my bread. Just tilted my head slightly, calm as static. She say that in front of Ryan? Henry paused. Shrugged. Yeah. I set the knife down. That was it. One question. One word. Okay. But inside, it wasn't okay. Inside, I felt something old and slow shifting into place. Like hearing the first creak of a steel trap locking in. That night, after the kids went to bed, I drove 24 minutes to a surveillance shop tucked between a vape store and an abandoned laundromat. Place smelled like burnt plastic and dust, and the guy behind the counter looked like someone who hadn't seen sunlight since Y2K. He slid a tiny black recorder across the counter without a word. No upsell. No smile. Just the kind of deadpan that tells you he knows why you're here. And he sold this same device to 100 other men who got tired of being made into villains in stories they never got to write. The thing was no bigger than a Bic lighter. Clear audio. Timestamped files. Battery lasted 8 hours. I bought 2. By Wednesday morning, the first recorder was inside the kitchen smoke alarm. It caught Melissa talking to Ryan over speakerphone while making a smoothie. No, he didn't say anything. He just stood there like always, like some wall decoration with a penchant. Ryan's voice, well, that's his whole personality. You said it yourself, he's a fossil. I mean, who still wears leather belts and reads paper books? Then she laughed. That mean, shallow laugh she saved for people she thought couldn't hear her. File saved. Wednesday_8_12 a.m_breakfastmockery.wave. Thursday, I left the second recorder in the minivan. That night, jackpot. Melissa driving, kids in the back. You don't have to tell Dad about this weekend, okay? It's just a little trip. Ryan's taking us to Bend. You know how Dad gets. He'll just make it weird. Emma, why would he care? Melissa, because he's nosy. And insecure. But don't worry, he's not fun like Ryan. We'll have a blast. Henry, will there be go-karts? Melissa, shoo. Don't tell Dad. Promise. Both, okay. File saved. Thursday_5_43 p.m_secret trip promise.wave. By Friday, I wasn't angry anymore. I was methodical. I created folders. Organized files. Labeled them with dates and categories. Gaslighting_mockery. Inappropriate boundaries. Parental alienation_light. I even started transcribing the best ones into a document with timestamps and quick commentary. Not emotional commentary, just observations. Reinforcing loyalty conflict. Downplaying father's relevance. Encouraging secrets. It was becoming a pattern. A clean, obvious pattern. Melissa wasn't just being a bad partner. She was actively eroding my position as a father systematically. Casually. And worst of all, she was doing it with such smug comfort, like she truly believed the world would never call her on it. Saturday morning, the kids were watching cartoons. I sat beside them, passing out cereal, when Emma asked, Can Ryan teach me to swim better this summer? I smiled. Of course. But I'll be there too. Remember, I'm the one who taught you to float. She blinked. Oh, right. She didn't mean to forget. Melissa was training them to. Later that day, I placed a recorder in the living room shelf, hidden behind a stack of decorative books Melissa never read. It caught Melissa complaining to a friend over speaker. Greg's just there. Like wallpaper. Ryan actually takes initiative. Greg just exists. Her friend's voice, unsure. But Greg's always been good with the kids, right? Melissa scoffed. He's good at being predictable. By Sunday, the recordings filled up nearly 3 hours. That night, I listened to one particular segment on loop. Melissa yelling at Henry for wanting to call me during their Bend trip. You just saw him. You don't need to talk to him again. Seriously, stop being so dramatic. In Henry's tiny voice, but I miss Dad. Pause. Then a car door slamming. That one hurt. But pain is useful when you know how to file it properly. File saved. Sunday_3_12 p.m. Henry Mrs. Dad.wave. Melissa was writing my obituary as a father and signing it with condescension. What she didn't realize was that every mocking sentence, every whispered secret, every casually cruel phrase was being archived. And when the time came, that archive would speak louder than her smile ever could. The call came at 7:41 p.m., right as I was watching an old Clint Eastwood flick with the volume turned low and a cold beer sweating in my hand. Melissa's name lit up the screen like a roach in a clean kitchen. I didn't rush to pick up. I let it ring 3 times before I answered, not out of hesitation, just to let the silence stretch. Where's Henry's backpack? She barked, skipping any greeting like I was the help, and she'd already called twice. I didn't even blink. Ask Ryan. You said he's the one they prefer. A beat of silence. Then, sharper. Greg, this isn't funny. He has a book report due, and he can't find his folder. I left it at your place. Why didn't you put it in his overnight bag? Oh, I figured Ryan's more present, I said, quoting her back at her with the sweetness of poison in a wine glass. Maybe he can manifest the backpack through emotional resonance. You're being childish. No, I said, sipping my beer. I'm being boring. Remember? That's what I do. She started to yell, launching into something about irresponsibility, impact on their academic success, and how I always deflect when cornered. The usual character assassination and business casual phrasing. I didn't interrupt, just waited until she was mid-rant, and then said, You done? What is wrong with you lately? She snapped. Click. I hung up, not slamming the phone, not shouting, just off, like switching off a light in an empty room. I let the quiet sit, let it crawl across the floor and up the walls of her perfect little narrative. Let her deal with it. 3 minutes later, call number 2. Declined. Then number 3. Number 4. Number 5. She didn't leave a voicemail, which meant she wasn't trying to fix anything. She just wasn't used to being ignored. Melissa thrived on control, on getting the last word, on sculpting perception. And that night, for the first time since this entire farce began, I denied her all 3. I turned the phone face down and went back to the movie. Didn't even rewind what I missed. Outside, it started raining. The kind of soft, steady drizzle that makes the world feel quieter than usual. I liked it. Made the house feel like a safe house, hidden from the performance happening outside its walls. I thought about Henry's folder. It was sitting in the trunk of Melissa's SUV, right where she left it after their Bend trip. I saw it when I picked up the kids Sunday night, but I didn't say anything. She told me Ryan handled all the logistics now, so I let him. Boundary drawn. That night, I didn't pace the hallway. I didn't stare out the window or replay the conversation. I took out the recorder, opened the file from the kitchen shelf earlier that day, and titled it Tuesday_6_35 p.m. Melissa_ tells kids to lie.wave. Then I added it to the binder. Under a new tab. Emotional coercion. I wasn't documenting this to get revenge. I was documenting because for 18 years, Melissa thought she owned the story. She told it at brunches, in texts, with her smile. A curated story. Polished. Palatable. Just enough drama to feel alive. Just enough distance to stay the hero. But now I had a copy of the story, too. And mine came with timestamps. At 10:17 p.m., I checked the phone. Still 5 missed calls. 1 text. You need to grow up. This is about the kids. I typed a reply, then deleted it. I didn't need to explain myself. Not anymore. Melissa could flail, scream, rage, twist the knife. But I'd built something she didn't know how to dismantle. Not a tantrum, not a counterattack. Just a record. Complete. Quiet. Indisputable. And that night, for the first time in weeks, I slept with the bedroom window cracked open. The air smelled like rain and resolve. It landed in her mailbox on a Thursday. A thick, cream-colored envelope too formal for junk mail, too heavy for anything casual. Melissa wasn't expecting anything. The wedding invite she was waiting on from her coworker Shannon would have come in a floral envelope. This one looked judicial. She brought it in with a stack of catalogs and flyers, tossed it on the counter, and went about her evening like it was just another Thursday of curated chaos, overpriced takeout, half-folded laundry, and background noise from whatever podcast Ryan was pretending to listen to that week. But curiosity eats fast. 10 minutes later, she opened it. Inside, a petition for primary custody, filed by Gregory T. Marshall. She read it twice before the meaning sank in. Then again, slower, as if that would rewrite the words into something more manageable. At first, she laughed. A short, sharp bark of disbelief. Oh my God, she called out from the kitchen. He's bluffing. Ryan was half watching a YouTube video on his phone, feet up on the ottoman, wearing a hoodie that probably cost more than his last car payment. Bluffing what? She waved the papers at him like a prop in a courtroom drama. Greg filed for custody. Full custody. Can you believe this? Ryan muted his video. Wait, what? He's not serious, Melissa said, flipping through the attached documents with the confidence of someone who's been faking authority so long she forgot what real accountability looks like. This is a scare tactic. He's trying to get under my skin. Ryan held out his hand. Let me see. Melissa tossed him the papers like they were beneath her. A minor inconvenience. Something that would go away if she rolled her eyes hard enough. But Ryan didn't laugh. He read slowly, mouth tightening with each page. There was a supplemental document stapled to the back, transcripts. Excerpts from recordings. Not full audio, just clean, redacted, summarized dialogue. Line after line. Mom says you're too boring. Ryan says Dad can't handle real life. You don't need to tell Dad. He'll just make it weird. Melissa's own words, laid out in black and white. No spin. No filters. Just data. Ryan swallowed. These are from recordings? Melissa's smirk faded slightly. It's out of context. Are you kidding? This is verbatim. She snatched the papers back. He probably edited it or something. Twisted the meaning. Ryan stared at her for a long beat. You told me you didn't care. That he was just gonna roll over. He was, she snapped. He was folding. He let you take the kids to Bend. Yeah, Ryan said, slowly. Because he knew. Melissa blinked. Ryan stood, rubbing the back of his neck. Melissa, this isn't some bluff. This is a strategy. The man's been planning this. These transcripts? This is ammo. Courts love this stuff. I'll explain it, she said, too quickly. It's nothing. Just normal parenting talk. Hyperbole. You know I exaggerate when I'm frustrated. Ryan didn't respond. He was still reading. You're not helping, she snapped. He looked up. No, I'm trying to figure out how deep this goes. She scoffed. Oh, don't act like he's some mastermind. He's Greg. He folds his laundry by color. Exactly, Ryan muttered, shaking his head. The guy's been playing the long game. And now you've got documented manipulation. She stood frozen, holding the papers like they were about to ignite. Her mind spinning, not with guilt, but logistics. Optics. How it would look. How she would spin this. Who she could text. Okay, she said, swallowing. Okay. This is fine. I'll call Carol. Your lawyer friend? She's not a custody lawyer, but she knows someone who is. Ryan didn't reply. She turned, dialing. Walked into the next room. Closed the door like she was still in control of the narrative. She didn't see Ryan quietly pick up one of the pages she dropped. Didn't notice how long he stared at the line. He just exists. Ryan is their real parent now. Didn't hear the soft sigh he let out. And she didn't see his reflection in the window, face blank, mouth tight, fingers slowly folding the page until the line vanished into creases. Melissa thought she was still ahead. But for the first time since this whole performance began, Something she'd never seen before crept in. Not regret. Not remorse. Panic. The real kind. The kind that doesn't come with an Instagram filter. It started with a phone call Melissa almost didn't answer. She was in the middle of texting her friend Jenny a screenshot of Greg's petition captioned, "Guess who thinks he's a legal shark now, shark," when the school counselor's name popped up on her screen. She debated ignoring it. Figured it was a scheduling issue or some nonsense about the science fair Emma forgot to finish. But something in her gut made her swipe to answer. "Hi, Mrs. Wallace? This is Mrs. Brennan, the guidance counselor at Norwood Elementary. Do you have a moment?" Melissa shifted on the bar stool in her kitchen. "Sure. What's going on?" "Well, I just finished a session with Emma and Henry, and I wanted to flag something early before it becomes a larger issue." Melissa's brow tightened. "What kind of issue?" They both mentioned they'll be living with their father full-time soon. Emma even said she's already picked which room she wants at his place. Henry talked about Greg taking over his carpool next week. Melissa blinked. "Excuse me. I just wanted to ask if there's been a court decision? Because we don't have any updated custodial documents on file, and this isn't what the current arrangement reflects." There was a silence, Melissa's silence, not the cool, strategic kind Greg had mastered, but the dumbfounded, scrambling for narrative kind. She looked around the kitchen like the answer might be hiding behind the blender. "No," she finally said, trying to add a laugh, but it came out brittle. "There's definitely been no change yet. Greg he filed something. Nothing's official." "Well, I just thought I'd bring it to your attention," Mrs. Brennan said gently. They both seemed very certain. And happy. Especially Emma. She said, "Daddy's getting everything ready already." Melissa felt something cold drip into her spine. "I'll be right there," she said, already grabbing her keys. It took her 19 minutes to get to the school, including running a red light she swore the city camera wouldn't catch. She parked diagonally across 2 visitor spots and marched inside, brushing past a receptionist who barely had time to buzz her in. But the moment she rounded the corner into the main hallway outside the front office, she froze. Greg was already there. He sat calmly in the plastic chair meant for waiting parents, wearing a plain gray sweater and black slacks, legs crossed, one ankle resting just above his knee like he had nowhere better to be. Across from him sat Mrs. Brennan and Principal Larkin, both flipping through his file. He looked up, met Melissa's eyes, and offered a polite nod. Not smug. Not theatrical. Just a man fully in control of his space. "Hi," she said, short of breath. "What's going on here?" Principal Larkin stood. "Mrs. Wallace, Greg was just showing us the preliminary documentation from the court regarding the custody petition. Of course, nothing is official yet, but we're required to be updated on any potential changes." Greg rose, smoothing the front of his sweater. "I brought everything for transparency. I wanted the school to be prepared, since Emma and Henry were already discussing the transition. Didn't want it to come as a surprise." Melissa clenched her jaw. "You went behind my back." "No," Greg said, voice steady. "I went through the front door. You just didn't bother looking." Mrs. Brennan, ever the peacemaker, added, "We just want what's best for the kids." They seem very comfortable with what they believe is happening. That confidence usually comes from something solid at home. Melissa laughed. "Too loud. Too sharp. This is manipulation." He's spinning them around. Of course they're confused. Greg didn't flinch. Instead, he gently pulled out a neatly labeled binder and opened to a tab marked Child Transition Plan. Inside, calendars, counseling notes, printed communications, activity lists, all prepared. Color-coded. Principal Larkin flipped through a few pages and blinked. "This is thorough." Melissa stepped forward, voice rising. "He's gaslighting all of you. He doesn't even know how to manage their schedules." Greg calmly turned the binder toward her. On the next page was a full weekly breakdown of the kids' activities, down to snack preferences and prescription refill dates. "I've always known," he said, soft and slow. "You just weren't paying attention." She felt her stomach drop. It wasn't just the binder. It was everything. The timing. The composure. The way Mrs. Brennan kept nodding. The way Principal Larkin was already taking notes. She had walked in expecting to throw water on a match. But Greg had already built the fireproof house. Outside the office window, she caught sight of Emma and Henry playing on the field. Emma pointed toward the parking lot, clearly telling her friend which car was Daddy's. Henry looked up, spotted her through the glass, and quickly looked away. Melissa felt her breath catch. She turned back to Greg. He was already closing the binder. "We'll follow the court's decision," he said simply. "That's what's fair." And just like that, she realized. She was no longer in control of the narrative. She was in his outline. And the story was no longer hers to tell. The marble floors of the county courthouse had never felt more smug beneath Melissa's boots. She strode across the lobby with her usual air of entitlement, chin tilted slightly upward like she'd just been nominated for Mother of the Year. Ryan followed a step behind, trying to look confident in a blazer that didn't quite fit his shoulders and cologne that made him smell like citrus anxiety. To Melissa, this wasn't a court appearance. It was a formality, a minor hiccup in what she still believed was a boring man's delusion. She expected a sleepy judge, maybe a polite lecture about shared responsibilities. At worst, some court-mandated parenting workshop she'd half listened to while scrolling Instagram. She had already rehearsed the eye rolls and the thin, concerned smiles. Had even picked out the outfit for a reluctantly tolerant ex-wife. Understated jewelry. Soft blue blouse. No lipstick, just the right shade of martyr. But when they stepped into the courtroom, Melissa paused. Greg was already seated. Alone, at first glance. Calm. No lawyer. No paperwork fanned dramatically across the table like in the movies. Just one man sitting with folded hands, watching the door as if he had been expecting a storm, and was prepared to enjoy the rain. Her smirk widened. Of course he didn't bring a lawyer. Greg always hated confrontation. He probably thought he could win this on vibes and bullet points. Then the side door opened. A woman stepped through it, heels echoing. Tall, professional, file in hand. And when Melissa's eyes met hers, the smile froze on her face like glass dropped into ice water. Angela Summers. Former best friend. Former maid of honor. Former everything. Back when they were in their early 30s, Angela and Melissa had been inseparable. Until Melissa cut her off during the whole, "choose me or your ethics" fallout. Angela had called her out, privately, on the way she talked about Greg. About how she framed everything to make herself the victim in a marriage that didn't seem broken until she decided it was inconvenient. Melissa hadn't spoken to her in over 4 years. Had barely even said her name. But now Angela was walking toward Greg's table and sitting next to him, pulling out documents, sliding over files. Melissa's jaw tightened. Ryan whispered, "Who's that?" She didn't answer. Angela stood as the judge entered. When they were all seated, Angela introduced herself, voice clear and measured. Angela Summers. Licensed child advocate. Appointed guardian ad litem by the court, per the petitioner's request. I've completed a full evaluation, submitted findings, and am prepared to present statements, audio evidence, and school counselor reports at the court's discretion. Melissa couldn't even hide it. Her face cracked. The smirk she wore like armor slipped, and for the first time, Ryan noticed. She leaned toward him, hissed through clenched teeth, "She's a therapist. She's got a vendetta." Angela looked straight at her, as if she'd heard it from across the room. "Mrs. Wallace and I used to be acquainted. But that relationship ended long before I pursued family law. I'm here for the children. Only." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Is there a conflict of interest, Mrs. Summers?" "No, Your Honor," Angela said smoothly. "If anything, my history ensures that I'm intimately familiar with the environment in question." Greg sat silent through all of this, like a man watching a chess game he already played 5 moves ahead. Then came the evidence. Angela produced copies of the transcripts, school reports, counseling notes. The binder Greg had built was now federal-grade ammunition. She read a few excerpts aloud. "Not all, just enough. Mom says you're too boring. You don't have to tell Dad. He'll just make it weird. Ryan says Dad's not real family anymore." Melissa's voice, her words, played back in a court of law. Ryan shifted in his seat, suddenly aware that this wasn't just awkward, it was tactical, coordinated, and dangerous. Melissa tried to interrupt. "This is selective. He's painting me as..." "Mrs. Wallace," the judge said flatly, "you'll have time to respond. Please let the court proceed." Angela sat back down, hands folded. Her eyes never left Melissa's. And in that moment, Melissa realized 2 things. First, This wasn't about Greg being clever. It was about Greg not being alone. And second, she had brought a boyfriend to court. Greg had brought a scalpel, and her name was on the table. The courtroom was so quiet, you could hear the page turn. The judge adjusted his glasses, leaned slightly forward, and read from the decision with the same emotion one might use to read the morning weather: neutral, inevitable. Having reviewed all submitted documentation, including recorded evidence, psychological evaluations, school counselor statements, and the testimony of the appointed guardian ad litem, Melissa's breath hitched. Ryan grabbed her knee under the table like he could steady her with pressure alone. This court finds it in the best interest of the minors to award primary custody to the petitioner, Mr. Gregory Marshall. The words didn't register right away. Melissa blinked, waiting for some legal caveat, a clause, pending review, but the judge kept going. This ruling is co-endorsed by Ms. Angela Summers, licensed child advocate, and the appointed guardian ad litem. Melissa's lips curled into a smirk, faint, desperate. Her voice, barely above a whisper. That's it? That's who signed off? His pet therapist? But then the judge turned the final page. And further, this decision has been signed and supported by an additional party of legal and personal relevance to the minors, Ms. Judith Carter. Melissa's entire body went cold. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Judith Carter. Her mother. Melissa whipped around so fast her chair screeched across the linoleum. And there she was, back row, right side. A floral blouse buttoned too tight, hands folded neatly in her lap. Hair pulled back. Expression carved from granite. You, what? Melissa croaked. Her mother didn't move, didn't smile, didn't blink. I was asked to review the materials, she said softly. Her voice echoed, flat and final. I did. Melissa stood, fist clenched, eyes wide. You're my mother. Judith tilted her head. And they're my grandchildren. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't a betrayal made for effect. It was cold, controlled, real. You told him I wasn't fit? I told the court you weren't present. I told them what I saw, what I heard, a pause, and what I didn't hear. The kids never talk about you, Melissa. They talk about soccer practice, about Dad, about dinner at his house. But they don't talk about you. Not fondly. Melissa's voice cracked. This is revenge. No, Judith replied. This is correction. In the silence that followed, Ryan slowly leaned away, trying not to be noticed. The back of his neck was flushed. His fingers trembled on the bench, betraying just how badly he wanted to disappear. The judge cleared his throat and continued like this courtroom hadn't just imploded. Based on all evidence presented, full physical and legal custody is awarded to Gregory Marshall, effective immediately. Visitation rights to be determined in a separate mediation hearing, pending behavioral review. Melissa sat down slowly, like gravity had multiplied around her. Her face was pale, jaw slack. She looked smaller than ever. Not humbled, hollowed. She tried to speak, but the words got tangled. She turned back toward her mother again, looking for something: sympathy, explanation, even anger. But Judith had already stood. She didn't linger, didn't gloat, just turned and walked out. The wooden courtroom doors shut behind her with a dull thud that somehow felt louder than the gavel. Greg didn't look at Melissa, didn't need to. His eyes stayed forward, on the judge, on the final printout being handed across the desk. His hands didn't shake. Melissa's did. For all the years she played chess in her marriage, she'd never once stopped to look at the other side of the board. Never wondered if the quiet man opposite her had been moving pieces in silence. She thought she had him cornered. But he wasn't the one who'd been alone. And now? She had the boyfriend. He had the kids. And her own mother had signed the checkmate. Melissa stood, lips parted, but no sound came out. The judge had already set the file aside, already moved on. Her moment, the one she thought she could command with a tearful monologue or a last-minute revelation, was gone. Court adjourned. Chairs scraped. Papers shuffled. Conversations resumed in quiet murmurs. But Greg didn't move right away. He stood only after the bailiff gestured toward the exit. No smug grin, no dramatic glance, just a steady breath, a hand extended toward Henry first, then Emma, and together they walked out. Like a family leaving brunch, not a courtroom. Melissa took a step after them, hesitated, and then stayed where she was. No one stopped her. No one called her name. Ryan was already gone. Literally. She looked behind her, confused, and saw the empty bench where he'd sat. His phone charger was still coiled there. He hadn't even taken his coffee cup. She didn't need to ask where he'd gone. Ryan wasn't built for this. Not for consequence. Not for scorched earth aftermaths. He liked his chaos clean, contained in text threads and filtered photos. Real damage? Real loss. That was Greg's territory now. Outside, through the courtroom glass, Melissa caught the image she would replay for the rest of her life. Greg knelt beside Emma, brushing a piece of lint from her jacket. Henry clutched a stack of papers and a plastic folder, not like a burden, but like something he wanted to be responsible for. Then, Greg opened his arms. Both kids stepped in. Emma turned for a moment, eyes drifting toward the courthouse doors. Melissa's heart jumped, but her daughter didn't wave. She reached down and grabbed Greg's hand tighter. And that was the last time Melissa ever saw her daughter look back. She stood frozen in the corridor long after the hallway emptied. When the bailiff asked her to leave, she didn't speak, just moved on autopilot through the building, down the concrete stairs, and into the parking lot where her car sat crooked, its front wheel nudged up on the curb like it, too, had been trying to flee before things collapsed. She drove home in silence. No radio, no calls, just the sound of tires against wet asphalt and the echo of her mother's voice. "You're not fit to raise them." Those words stung more than anything the court said, because they came from the one woman who knew her best, the one woman who used to defend her without hesitation. And now even she had walked away. When Melissa pulled into the driveway, something felt off. She couldn't explain it. The front porch light was off, even though she always left it on. The blinds were half drawn. The air around the house felt foreign, like she was walking up to someone else's home. She climbed the stairs, pulled her key from her purse, and inserted it into the deadbolt. It didn't turn. She tried again. Nothing. Her heart pounded. She jiggled it, forced it, even pulled the key out and stared at it like it had betrayed her. She rang the doorbell, even though she knew no one was inside. Still nothing. A man's voice called from next door. Mr. Latham, the retired widower who mostly ignored her. "You trying to get in?" he asked, mildly amused. She turned. "Yes. It's my house." He scratched his chin. "Not anymore. Saw the locksmith truck here yesterday. Said something about new ownership. That guy Greg, right? He was here with a notary." Melissa's voice cracked. "That's my house." He shrugged. "Guess not." She stood there for a long time, hand on the door, forehead leaning gently against the wood like she could will it open with enough shame. She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she sat on the steps as the sun went down, her phone in hand, screen glowing with the missed calls she'd made to Ryan. Unanswered. A single text came in from an unknown number. It was a scanned PDF of a quitclaim deed. Signed, sealed, transferred. Melissa was officially a guest in every life she used to command. No house, no partner, no mother, no kids. And somewhere, across town, Greg was probably finishing dinner, quietly, calmly, helping Emma with homework, making Henry laugh about something subtle. Not gloating, just living. And for the first time in her entire life, Melissa wasn't invited.